we are going to continue solving quadratics. The only difference is that today we are going to be solving quadratics that are not in standard form. So just as a quick little recap between what standard form is any equation that looks like this. This is standard form of a quadratic. So for example, if I actually had numbers, it could be something like 7x squared plus 5x minus 3. So this is something that's in standard form. We're going to be looking at some where they're not in standard form, so they will look something like the following, like 3x squared plus 4x equals 10. So where some of the terms are on the right side of the equal sign and we do not have the number 0. We have something like a 10 or some other term is on the right side and they're on opposite sides, so we have to put it in standard form before we're allowed to actually factor with our x factor and then solve. So let's go ahead and get started with that. We're going to do 6 examples. So standard form, again, it's at the top of your page. We're going to go ahead and start with example number 1. So like yesterday, we went straight to the x factor, but today we can't do that because it's not in standard form. So how do we work around that? So this is where our solving linear equation skills come in, where we just move things from the right side to the left side. So we want to move that 12 to the other side. So just kind of look at it. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 12 on both sides, remembering that the 12 does not combine with the x squared and the 12 does not combine with the x. So we just rewrite it in standard form from highest power to lowest power. So it should look like the one in the top with actual numbers. So when we know how to rewrite it, x squared plus x minus 12, now we should know what to do. Same thing as yesterday, x factor and solve. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and put my x factor. Just put a small on the side, doesn't have to be a large x. Put minus 12 at the top, invisible 1 here. So two numbers that multiply to negative 12 and combine to give me 1. I would use 4 times 3, where the negative would be the 3. So I've used my x factor to figure out the two terms. Now we're going to go ahead and use our shortcut, and I'm allowed to use my shortcut because there is a 1 right there. So I'm just going to use a shortcut, x plus 4, x minus 3, that all equals to 0. Now I'm going to go ahead and solve this. What's going to make this first factor equal to 0? So what's going to cancel a positive 4? My answer is going to be x equals to negative 4. That's my first answer. Or I'm going to ask myself the same question. What's going to make the second factor equal to 0 for the 0 product property? And what's going to cancel a negative 3 or a minus 3? My answer would be a positive 3. So these are my two solutions, and I'm done with number 1. So the only difference from yesterday to today is it's not in standard form. I just got to put it in standard form. Let's move on to the next problem. Number 2, we have the same problem. We have the x term on the right side, but it's not in standard form because it's on the right. So I need to move that negative 5x to the left side and put them in standard form order. So I'm going to add it on over. So I'm going to put 5x added to both sides. Remembering it does not combine with anything because it's the x term. We've got the x squared term and this constant term. So I'm just going to make sure when I write it out, I put power of 2, power of x, just x, and then the minus 2 last. So there is my quadratic. So now we should know what to do. Just x factor and solve. So let's go ahead and start with the x. I'm going to set up my x factor to factor this. So I'm going to ask myself, what goes at the top? So it's 3 times 2. They multiply, and the 2 is negative, so I get negative 6 at the top, and positive 5, which is your middle term, goes at the bottom. So I'm going to look for two numbers that multiply to 6 and subtract to 5. So my two numbers would be 6 times 1, where the negative is the 1. So they subtract and give me 5. The question is, can I use my shortcut? And the answer is no. I have this 3 right here, which prohibits me from using the shortcut, so I've got to factor by grouping here. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing that. I'm going to write out my 4 terms. 3x squared stays. The middle term, 5, gets replaced for the 6 times negative 1. So put 6x minus 1x, don't forget the variables. And then I'm going to drop my equals to 0. Now I'm going to go ahead and factor by grouping like we've done many times before. Going to split it. Remember, when you split it, you make sure the negative stays on the right side when we factor. So I'm going to ask myself, what do these have in common for the first two in the group? They're both multiples of 3, and they both have a x. I'm going to write it out. Again, if you can skip this step, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and factor these out now. They both have a 3 and an x in common, a 3 and an x. So GCF is 3x, and I'm left with x plus 2. On the right side, I ask myself, what do those have in common? They both are divisible by 1, and they both have that negative. So I'm going to factor out just a negative. So there's only that negative we can take. Let me just write that a little neater. So they both have a negative, and 2 and 1 are only divisible by 1. So I'm going to factor out just the negative, which is going to switch my signs. So I'll put a negative 1, and I'm going to be left with x plus 2. Again, if you put the 1s next to the x's, that's fine. Again, my goal is always to make these two binomials match, which they do, to do another GCF. So I'm going to write that GCF out, x plus 2. And I'm left with 3x minus 1 for my second factor. And that all equals to 0. Now I ask myself, I have to solve this. Again, this from here is pretty much what we've gone over before, the factoring. Now we're going to go ahead and solve for x. So what's going to make that first term equal to 0? So what's going to cancel a positive 2? My answer should be a negative 2. So my final answer here on the left side is x equals to negative 2. On the right side, what's going to make 3x minus 1 all equal to 0? Again, you may not be able to do this one in your head, so I'm just going to write the work on the side. So we write 3x minus 1 equal to 0. So what makes it equal to 0? I don't have that much room here, so I'm going to write off to the side, and then I'll come back and fill in the answer. So I'm going to just erase this. Although you should continue working right there, I'm going to write it here on the top. So what makes 3x minus 1 equal to 0? I'm going to add 1 to both sides to get x by itself. So we have 3x equal to 1, divide by 3. So x is equal to 1/3. So my second answer is x equal to 1/3. So I'm going to put or x is 1/3. So these are my two solutions that solve this quadratic and make it equal to 0. So first term negative 2, second term gives me positive 1/3. Let's go ahead and move on to the next example. So number 3. One more time, this is not in standard form, so how do we get it into standard form in order for us to factor then solve? We need that 0 at the right. So here, this time we have two terms on the right, which means we're going to have to move them both over. So I'm going to subtract that 4x. This time the 4x will combine with the 6x because they both have an x. So let's go ahead and combine those. So we have x squared plus 2x equals 15. But this one is still not in standard form, so we have to subtract that 15 on both sides, which will not combine with anything, so I'm going to write them all out. X squared plus 2x minus 15. Now you should know what to do. X factor and solve. So let's go ahead and set that x factor up. Top should be negative 15. Bottom should be a 2. So two numbers that multiply to 15 and add to 2, it's 5 times 3, where the negative is the 3. Now, can I use my shortcut, or am I going to have to do this the long way? So again, I can use the shortcut because I have an invisible 1 up front. So I'm going to go ahead and use my shortcut, x positive 5 times x minus 3. All that equals to 0. Now to just finish it off and get my final answer, I ask myself, what's going to make the first term equal to 0? So what makes x plus 5 equal to 0, or what cancels a positive 5? Answer should be a negative 5. Or for the second term, what's going to cancel an x minus 3 out and make it a 0, or what's going to eliminate a negative 3? Answer should be a positive 3. So those are my final answers, negative 5 and positive 3. Let's go ahead and move on to the next problem. So here we have a word problem where we have to write out our own quadratic. So it says if x squared is added to, so again, we're going to be using a plus sign, 2x. So I'm going to start writing that out. So if x squared is added to 2x, the sum is, again, the word is, so the final answer is equal to 35. So this is my quadratic I'm going to be using for this one. I'm going to write it a little neater right now. So again, I'm going to set that up. I'm going to move the 35 from the right side to the left like I did with every problem. It doesn't combine. And then I'm going to go ahead and factor it. Again, nice thing is I can use the shortcut on this one as well. So I have negative 35 at the top, 2 at the bottom. 7 times 5 is 35, where the negative is a 2. Use the shortcut because this is a 1, so x plus 7, x minus 5. That equals to 0. I ask myself, what are my solutions that will cancel the x plus 7? It's x negative 7. Or what's going to cancel the second factor? Positive 5. These are my final answers. And I'm done with this. So now it's your turn to go ahead and try the next 2 problems out. Go ahead and pause your video and come back and check your work. All right, now that you've done both of these examples, let's go ahead and see how well you did. So again, make it in standard form. Nothing combines. You should have factored it and gotten the following. Final answers, I'll write them out. X equal to 8 or x equal to 8. So you should have gotten a double answer that's exactly the same. So you don't have to actually write it twice if it's the same answer twice. But if you want to see the work for it, see it. Otherwise, fast forward to get your other answer out. So 64, negative 16, 8 times 8. So here are the actual steps. I'm just going to quickly go through them since you should already have most of the work done. So this is what you should have. And again, each of these gives you an 8. So you just wrote it once. So if you just wrote x equal to 8, then you have the correct answer either way. You don't have to technically write it twice. All right, let's move on to the last problem and check your work. All right, this next one, you should have gotten the final answers of x equal to negative 12. Oops, let me see, let me make sure I get right here. You should have gotten the final answers of x equal to negative 12 or x equals to negative 3. Okay, you're pretty much done. Otherwise, if you want to go ahead and check your work, if you're not sure how we got those answers, stay on the video or go ahead and start your work. So the way we get this answer is the following way. Let me just escape out of this. You're supposed to first move the 4 over. It combines with the 40, which gives you 36. Move the 15 over, which combines with nothing. And you get the following trinomial, which you're going to factor. And luckily, you're able to use that shortcut for convenience, which we have 36 here. We have 15. 2 solutions that give you 36 are 12 times 3, and they add to 15. You get x plus 12, x plus 3 because of that shortcut, because of this 1. And that's how you get your final answers of x equals to negative 12 from the first factor or x equals to negative 3 from the second factor. All right, go ahead and get to work then.